Disastrous spring floods loom for half of the United States. The historic floods that hit the Great Plains last week are perhaps just the start of a very wet and destructive spring. That's according to the worst flood risk is clustered around the central and southern U.S., along the Missouri and Mississippi rivers. Some of the hardest, wet and snowy conditions are boosting flood risks across the states. This winter was some areas of the Great Plains got double their usual rain and snow this winter, including the Red River of the North Basin along the borders of Minnesota and North Dakota, according to the NOAA report. Soils in the Midwest. This is shaping up to be a potentially unprecedented flood season, with more than 200 million people at risk for flooding in their communities, Ed Clark, director of NOAA's National Water Center, said in. Both moderate and residents of smaller cities along the flood-prone rivers are some of the most vulnerable to impacts, Peak says. The local economy. During winter, many of these Great Plains fields remain fallow. Rushing flood water. Spring floods will carry nutrients from farms into the Mississippi River, and then into the Gulf of Mexico, where experts anticipate they'll cause a large hypoxic zone, Clark said in a press conference. This is because it's hard to say precisely how much climate change is contributing to flood risk from rivers. But, Peak said, in the future, floods will threaten more lives and structures simply due to where we're constructing homes. We're projected to, when it comes to flood risk, officials say to exercise caution. Please don't assume that. Search for location/city.
Raindrop, drop top smoking, no cooking the hot pot. Fucking on your bitch, yeah, that. Looking up, open the park pot.